Chapter 4. Into the soil the sprig planted the seeds of many fruits, flowers, and trees, to clean the air of the thick black smoke which draped over the valley like a vast dark cloak. The cold, dark smoke crept slowly up the path and into the Scruffs wood, where it snaked and wound between the trees. The forest animals fled the toxic fumes to the top of the hill. There they sheltered with the sprig, under the protective branches of Great Grandrasil. The old, noble tree began to sing into the wind. Its swaying leaves rustled, and its reaching roots rumbled. The words of trees flowed fluidly upon the breeze, and into the hearts of all those who could feel. It would sing. Breath of air, clean and pure, clear of smoke, seeds grow once more. Strong and tall, high and wide, from deep in earth to soar in sky. The sprig sprang around the still and smoky woods, collecting seeds from the plants, bushes, and trees. Picking as many as its branches could carry, it stored them all inside its leafy body. The sprig transferred its magic into the bundle of seeds, and they tingled and glowed. Once the sprig could carry no more, it made its way between the trees and under the arch of tangled branches that formed the Scruffs Wood's gate. It waddled over to the cliff and stood at the edge, looking out over Scruffyness. Below it could see the many chimney stacks, bursting fountains of smog billowing into the air. Some Scruffs were shoveling trash into the fires, and other, bossier ones were shouting at the rest. One was louder than all others, and appeared to be in charge, sitting atop the largest Scruff of all. She had greasy white hair, and her face glowed bright red with rage. Even from so far away, the sprig could hear what she said.
"Faster, you lazy, stupid Scruffs! The fires need fuel, and there's not enough!"
Gibgob yelled, as she steered Munch around by his eyebrows, grabbing and tugging the bristly hairs, which made Munch wince and yelp, "Ouch!" as he twisted and turned. The sprig noticed Scrag in his yard below, shoveling piles of trash into a bathtub. The sprig curled itself into a ball and slowly rolled forward towards the cliff's edge. Just before it toppled over, it paused, rocking back and forth with a nervous uncertainty, balancing carefully before the fall. It finally found its courage and tumbled over the edge, rolling faster and faster, picking up speed and springing from rock to ledge down onto the floor of Scrag's yard. Scrag was busy shoveling trash and didn't look up from his work. The sprig rolled across the muddy floor, then crashed against the bathtub, which rang with a bright, metallic ping. Slightly stunned, the sprig uncurled and fell onto its back. Scrag thought he heard a ringing sound, and came over to investigate. He leaned over the tub and raised his beak, flaring his nostrils and sniffing the stale, smoky air. After a puzzling second or two, he frowned his brow and grunted, picked something green and slimy from his ear-hole, chewed it, then waddled away to the other side of the yard. The sprig peered its purple eye over the brim of the bath. The stalk on top of its head turned to feel the wind for any movement. The sky cracked with orange slivers of sunset, tearing the veil of smoke. Beams of light pierced through, creating patches of evening warmth. The sprig crept out from his hiding place, weaved between the shadows surrounding the sunlit floor, and edged along the crumbling stone walls towards the gate. Scrag stopped digging into the scattered piles of trash, the last remains of the trash slide. He sniffed the air. Something smelt. Clean. He turned quickly, poking his head out and scrunching his beady eyes. Looking at the gate to his yard, he spotted a lone leaf swishing and gliding in the breeze, landing gently onto the mud. The sprig tiptoed carefully down Scrag's alley, pressing itself against a shadowy wall. Looking out onto Bog Lane, it could see many Scruffs with shovels and spades, buckets and barrows, scooping up trash to fuel the fires. The Sprig waited until the Scruffs were looking away, then sprung across the street and scurried up a pile of dung which rested against the hairy, thatched roof. As the Sprig struggled to clamber up, along the street lumbered a big, plodding Scruff. It was Munch, clumsily plodding up the hill, with Gibgob riding upon his back. She was barking orders at Munch and pointing at things, holding her wig on her head as she bounced up and down. Without hesitation, the Sprig sunk itself into the dung pile, planting its roots and pulling down into the muck. Poking its eye stalk out of the top, it froze still as the nasty pair of Scruffs reached the top of the street.
You! I can see you. You can't hide from me,
snarled Gibgob. Surprised, the Sprig started to tremble with fear, scared of being caught. The startled shrub prepared to escape. Suddenly, from a dark doorway next to the dung pile, sprang a small, nervous Scruffling. It wrestled with a fat, wriggling worm, held tightly in its paws.
What are you up to?
Snarled Gibgob. Her large, slimy tongue spat from her beak as she spoke. The small Scruffling quickly hid the worm behind its back, hoping that Gibgob or Munch hadn't seen it wriggling in his hands.
Nothing, your horribleness,
he squeaked, trying not to look at the bossy pair. Instead, he stared down at the deep, muddy puddles pitting Bog Lane and turned his taloned toes to face each other.
Oh, nothing, eh?
Gibgob inquired menacingly, as she leaned down towards the Scruffling and smiled a sinister, toothy grin.
Stop being lazy and get back to work,
her rising voice rasping into a deafening bark. This startled the Scruffling, causing him to spring fearfully into the air. As he hit the floor, his long, sharp claws raked at the mud-caked street. Spinning his small, stumpy legs, he tried to run as fast as he could towards a nearby alleyway. Before the Scruffling could get away, Munch grabbed the worm by its wriggling, loose end, snapping it away from the young Scruff's claws. Munch laughed, opened his mouth wide, and tossed the worm in the air. Before he could eat it, Gibgob snatched it up with her long, twisted beak and gobbled it down, gulping the fat, slimy worm into her belly. Gibgob let out a long, gurgling burp, adjusted her wig, and clonked Munch between the eyes. He winced, let out a sigh, then turned very slowly, plodding his feet into the sticky mud below. "That was my worm," he said, quietly sulking and stomping his feet.
What did you say?
Screeched Gibgob. "Nothing," he chirped, sheepishly. The Sprig waited for the bumbling bullies to disappear down the street. The sky above them radiated brilliant shades of peach and pink as the sun began to set between the huge plumes of smoke. When they had gone, the Sprig popped up out of the muck and shook itself off. Some of the seeds were shook from its bushy body and blew around the street. They glowed with golden light, twinkling as they landed into the mud, muck, holes and nooks, and every other little place they could. The Sprig didn't waste any time. It ran up the mound of muck and onto the hairy roof of the house above. Clambering up to the top as fast as it could, the Sprig then hid behind a small chimney, which was spewing black smoke. Its leafy body began to turn brown as it neared the rising trash clouds. The Sprig waited until it couldn't see any Scruffs below, then carefully crept along the rooftop. As it moved along, it dispersed more glowing seeds into the air. The small bush sneaked along the rooftops of Bog Lane, down the hill and into the town, leaping and rolling from roof to roof, down large piles of garbage and along the alleys and streets. Seeds sprinkled from its body everywhere it went. After a short while, the dark of night fell upon Scruffyness, and the smoke-filled air blotted out the stars. The dark of night fell upon Scruffyness, and the smoke-filled air blotted out the stars. However, the town shone brightly in the golden glow of the scattered magical seeds. Scruffs came out of their huts and holes to investigate. They shielded their eyes from the bright, twinkling lights and scratched their fuzzy heads, confused by the glow and where it came from. Most became scared and ran back inside to hide in the comforting darkness within. After some time, the small, bushy silhouette of the Sprig dropped down into the alley next to Scrag's yard. The yard was covered in seeds and bathed in their golden glow. The pulsing light projected dancing shadows which flickered and swayed upon the walls. The Sprig sneaked across the freshly swept floor. All of the trash had been burned, and the fires beneath the chimneys had died down. Embers glowed bright shades of red and kept the yard warm. All was silent but the crackling remnants of the fire. Reaching the bathtub, the Sprig hid there for a moment, peeking its eyeball above the brim on its stalk. Suddenly, the door of the shack swung open, and in the doorway stooped Scrag, holding a crooked spade in his claws. He sniffed the air, darting his head and pointing his beak around. His gaze fell upon the bathtub at the centre of the yard. There was nobody there, but again a small leaf, twirling in the air, then landing softly upon the rim of the bath. Suddenly, a rustling sound broke the silence, betraying the Sprig's escape. It was scrambling up a pile of trash and grasping at a low crack in the wall, trying desperately to climb the cliff. Scrag swung his spade at the rocks, narrowly missing the Sprig's roots as they were lifted from the ground. The metal tool rung loudly as it clanged against the stone. The spade's vibrations travelled up Scrag's arms, shaking him so violently that he fell to the ground, frozen on his back and with a grimace upon his face. After taking a moment to recover, he scrambled unsteadily to his feet and swung the spade once more, in a dizzying twirl. This time it swiped close to the Sprig's back, slicing some leaves away, which floated down onto Scrag's angry face. The Sprig scrambled further up the rock. It stopped briefly and turned to taunt Scrag, who grew enraged below. It chuckled and blew a raspberry with its leafy tongue. Suddenly, the Sprig had to dodge as the spade flew past its head and hit against the rock face below. It wedged into a crack, where it twanged and wobbled. The Sprig jumped onto the handle and it bent down, then quickly sprung back, shooting the small magical shrub into the air. Over the cliff top it sprang into the woods, where it disappeared into the dense, shadowy undergrowth. Scrag, still looking up, grunted at the spade, which was too high up to reach. He turned and waddled back to the hut, slamming the door shut behind him. Soon the smoky clouds parted and the moon shone brightly. The seeds scattered throughout the town continued their pulsing glow. With growing luminosity, their halo bloomed against the night sky,